Here is an uncomfortable truth. Most of the stories we put into training aren't really stories at all. They're kind of a character just standing there on screen, telling and telling and telling until the next button just flashes up. There's no conflict, there's no tension, nothing that makes the learner stop, think, and worry. And that is exactly why so much of the course content gets forgotten the minute the course ends. My guests today have spent their entire career fixing that. Rance Greene wrote the book on instructional story design, and in this conversation, he breaks down actually what separates a good story that drives behavior change from one that's just sucky fluff. We're going to get into conflict, character development, observable actions, and why employee onboarding training like values training falls flat without them. If you build learning for a living, you're going to want to listen to this conversation because it's going to change how you structure your next scenario. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, Erick Prospero here with the Microlearning Lab. Today we have Rance Greene, the author of Instructional Story Design and the founder of Need a Story, and he also has a series of courses online on storytelling. I'm very excited about this podcast, one, because I'm a huge story structure fan. Not only that, he is the expert in this space. But before I steal your momentum, Rance, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Thank you for having me. First of all, Eric, it's a pleasure to be here again. The mission of needastory.com broadly is to humanize the workplace. I've had the privilege of working in the arts, the ministry, corporate enterprise, and now as a business owner, bringing business stories to life. I built the School of Story Design specifically for instructional designers who want to master the process of instructional story design. Many of our students come into the school unsure of how to tell a good instructional story. They're in the right place. They even have less confidence in how to train with a story. And so it's a thrill to bring my expertise in the field to thousands of instructional designers who are making an impact in their own companies and for their own practices.
Wonderful. And in the comments or the description of this video, we're going to include a very nice discount code and links to where to find this content as well. So again, this is just a game changer, right? And in the world of AI slop, like the ability to create authentic stories that matter, that drive real behavior change, and also just the ROI in terms of what the course offers is there. Now, on the topic of storytelling, Rance, let's start with a fun question. What's a common misconception in your field that makes you smile or laugh?
Yeah, that's hard to pick one, but I think I will land with stories for training are fluff. And although there's some truth to it, because a lot of stories in training are fluff, that is not a true instructional story becomes the centerpiece for the training and really an incredible asset and a focal point and a catalyst for the training itself. So stories are fluff is the misconception that I would say kind of makes me snicker a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know we've seen different clients initially want to lean into more didactic training, right? That lecture-based content.
Yeah.
Very knowledge-based, but then we often try to pull them back to, okay, what can we have in this, whether if it's a passive learning experience or interactive course, to actually drive some form of behavior change? And typically, story is the vehicle for that. Why do you think this is the case?
Yeah, so I agree. And I think that a lot of stories that are introduced into training from maybe designers who don't have the experience or the expertise to create a great story basically turn a tell test type of experience, and they'll just put words in a character, and the character will be speaking and telling, and they'll think, I've made a story, because a character is now telling all of that information. But when a story is designed for instruction, you've got these wonderful characters, there's this conflict. People watching the story unfold should be able to relate to those characters because the characters have been built with that audience in mind. And the conflict should be real, should be strong, should be reflective of what's actually happening out in the workplace. because that's when you are able to just present a story, a series of events that people observe and they're like, something seems not right. They might not even be sure what it is. But in the training, you prompt them to help them figure out what just happened in that story and how to fix it, and then give them practice doing the new skill.
Nice. No, and I love that differentiation, because I know when I started in the industry, I was guilty of that too. That just telling, and it's easy to fall into. Actually, in fact, I just started writing just a science fiction book, right? Something I'm very excited about, and I got caught into that. I spent too much time on world building because it was just a lot of telling, but not enough conflict, right?
Action. Yeah, people are wanting action. I did not know this about you. That's so exciting. You're being a fictional author. That's awesome.
Yeah. Sorry, fictional author. I'm a very big sci-fi nerd. So
okay.
I don't want to get into it. I can talk your ear off about it. I'm not sure if you're into sci-fi, but usually when I get going, it just turns the conversation into this debate on space travel and you know what. But I'll say.
But I'm excited that you're writing. That's so wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. No, I know. It's my creative outlet. It's what I do, and I'm definitely leaning into it. I'm using AI for a portion of it, but more for the feedback, right? Consistently hearing feedback and ideas. So I produce a portion of content, and I run it through feedback and say, okay, what could I make better about this? What other ideas? So it's a different type of take. Just because I know there is a ton of AI slop happening out there, right? You're going to start to notice a lot more up and coming authors in the space. I'm not sure if it's happening in the sci-fi quite yet, but I know in the professional services space. But onto the topic of storytelling. I know it's very easy for an instructional designer to think they're good at storytelling, right? Even for myself, right? It's nothing that I've studied, but we have some experience with stories, right? We go to the movies, we read books. How would you explain this to an instructional designer so they know the difference between a good story and a bad story that's effective for training?
Yeah. All those compliance courses you're forced to take every year where you have to listen to the narration before you can click next and score 100% on the test every single time because the test is so easy. So now imagine that course starts with a riveting story, a story that you connect with, and you have to solve problems based on that story that were actually useful to you at work. So that's the type of instruction that I design. And at my online school, at the School of Story Design, I train other designers how to develop story-based training. A lot of those instructional designers come in not knowing what a good instructional story is. So we start with the very beginning. Okay, you're going to have an interview with a stakeholder. This stakeholder is going to say something along the lines of, we need training. And your next task is to ask them what the root problem is, what the business outcome is. Is training the best solution for this particular root problem? Is it going to produce the business outcome that they want if we have some sort of learning experience? Once you have determined that training is a good solution, then you would go to the next stage of discovery to find out who are you training? Who are these people? And create an audience profile. You want to know what those learners are thinking. What do they value? What do they fear? Why might they resist training? All of these types of questions that you learn about who your learning audience is are really going to help to get you to know them as people, not just as brains, but as a whole person. Then those attributes can be transferred over to these relatable characters that you create for your story. Characters that this learning audience is going to say, I get those characters. That character is a lot like somebody I know, or that character is a lot like me. The second asset you're going to go for is, in the discovery stage, is an action list. A list of observable actions that people should be able to do as a result of training. And this is often where instructional designers might go off course a little bit. Instead of asking the subject matter expert, what do people who are aware of our customer first policy actually do? Getting past aware, getting past understand, getting past know. and really drilling down to observable actions. Well, what we really want them to do is smile at our customers if they're 10 feet away. Okay, that's an observable action. And we want them to greet them and say this phrase, hello, welcome to our store. How can I help you? Okay, that's observable. I could take a video of somebody doing that. As instructional designers, it's our privilege to help subject matter experts drill down to those observable actions. And the reason I describe all of that, Erick, is because without an audience profile and without an action list, you really don't have anything for training. And you definitely don't have anything for a story. If you have them both and they're in good order, I can create relatable characters that this audience relates to and put them in conflict with this action list. The actions that I'm training people to do, and the result is, boom, a tailor-made story for this particular audience to do this particular thing.
And I love the fact that you bring up conflict, right? And I noticed in your book, it's a central component to effective story design. Why does this help people learn?
Have you ever taken a course, Erick, that the information, you understood the information, but then when you were done with the course, you just kind of forgot about it? Sure. We've all taken courses like that. Maybe we had to admit it. Maybe we've even designed some like that because there's no friction. It's a frictionless experience. I didn't have to think too hard. I didn't have to be, critically think too much. The story, the scenario that I took was really, really low conflict, and it resolved itself within 2 sentences. The root cause of poorly designed instructional stories is that either the designer of the story didn't know who they were training, or they didn't have an action list and put those characters in conflict with that action list. So they produce a story that's frictionless. And frictionless stories, frictionless training, it goes right through, straight through. There's no stopping it. There's nothing to stop it. But if there is conflict, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up, if there is conflict in the story, it sparks an emotion, first of all. There's tension here, and you feel it. And then you're asking yourself, why am I feeling this way? What's actually going on here? I sense that something is out of place. I sense that something is wrong, but what is it exactly? And the learner may not know or be able to pinpoint it, but they will be able to pinpoint it in the training after the story, because you're going to prompt for that. And that's why conflict is so necessary in instruction and the stories that we create for instruction.
I like that approach too. It definitely speaks to the elephant, or that instinctual side of humans, right? When there's conflict, there's risk, and it makes it a lot easier to lean into content. Now,
yeah. So let me tell you a quick story. Madeline is a manager, and she has a direct report. Her direct report's name is Sophia. Sophia comes into Madeline's office. Madeline has shut down her computer. She has her notes. She has Sophia's file right here by her side. She makes eye contact with her and says, hello. Welcome. I'm so glad that you made it to our one-on-one. Is there anything that you want to talk about before we get into this? How's your week going? Madeline tells her about her week. That's wonderful. I gave you a form, some questions to fill out, to think about before you came to our one-on-one. Do you want to talk through those? Sophia wants to talk through those right away. So she talks through them with her. Madeline is laser focused. She is totally get that. What I hear you saying is, she's doing, right? So cut the story for a minute. Madeline's doing everything right. This is a series of events, but it's not really a story, because Madeline is this picture perfect manager who's doing everything right, which is not reality. First of all, the reason you're making this manager training is because there's problems out here, and those problems have been removed from the training. But if you bring those problems in, Sophia comes in, Madeline's on her computer. Just 1 second. Be right with you. Go ahead and have a seat. She finishes her email. Then she puts it aside, puts her phone on her desk. Hi, Madeline. Okay, let me get your file. Just a moment. Now we have a story where Madeline is not being mean, not being a bad person, but she's making some mistakes. and you feel it, right? You can feel on behalf of Sophia, man, I don't want to be in this room because there's some tension here, right? But that's the kind of instructional story that is really going to help people to stop, take notice, and be like, okay, what's going on here? So that's my stories.
Love it. You know what, the funny thing too is I was initially thinking, how can you bring tension to maybe a softer or lighthearted topic like employee onboarding? We do a lot of employee onboarding content, and it's supposed to be focused on, let's just say, values, right? But one of the best ways to teach values, right, the idea of choosing an action over something else, is through structural story. I mean, because otherwise you're just telling people what your values, right? I think through story, that conflict, that light tension of when somebody's misaligned with values, like, what does that do? And I think it's one of the best ways to showcase it too. So, and there's topics like safety, right? I think it would be easy to create a story around safety, right? But then for softer topics like values, employee onboarding, I guess it is pretty easy to create some tension that's relevant.
I mean, when you think about values, what are values typically? They're noun, respect, integrity. Those words mean absolutely nothing, right? And you're right, they mean something when there's a story that goes with it. So you can have examples of, respectful behavior that define what you mean. But if you're using instructional story design, a lot of onboarding training is tell. But what I ask people who design onboarding is, what are employees required to do? Do you want them to fill out a form? Do you want them to demonstrate this core value of respect on the job? What does that look like? Drill down to some observable actions that define what respect actually means. Then you've got, not only do you have training instead of an awareness campaign, you also have the raw materials for a story, because now you have things that you actually want people to do as a result of training. So if it is to fill out a form, or if it is to demonstrate respect in the workplace, drill down to some observable actions of what that means. At our company, that means you listen to everyone's opinion before, making a judgment call. All right. So you can create a story where a character is not doing that. They're doing something else instead. And giving the learner opportunities to spot it, come up with ideas about what that person may do, and then give them feedback that directs them in the way that they should go. So, yeah.
Love it.
I hear that a lot. Values training, awareness training, those types of things. I hesitate to put the word training after those unless you're actually asking people to do something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Otherwise, you're just telling them, hey, we value respect or humility, right? So one of our values at Ninjatropic is, one of them's humility, another one is self-improvement. And our approach to values, the funny thing is, we intentionally have that conflict built in, because for us, a value doesn't mean anything unless you're exchanging something for it, right? I mean, everyone's going to prefer respect or humility or like planning ahead, right? I mean, who wouldn't? But the stories we tell when we're onboarding, or the examples we have, it's, look, when you have to be open to feedback to grow, right? And that's the value we have here, is the fact that we have this open mindset, right? You're going to receive feedback from clients, from partners, from internal stakeholders. That's not always positive. And that's the challenge, and that's a choice we're making for humility, right? Our value. Or even for planning, right? We're going to invest the time ahead, even if it means stopping production and sharpening the axe. So it's interesting, because that's one of the true ways to drive something like values training, or to at least separate it from like an awareness conversation.
Right. So as you were describing that, when you said humility, I had something completely different in mind. But when you started defining it as, when you receive feedback, receive it gracefully, that to me is something concrete. Now I know, okay, that's what they mean by humility, that I need to receive constructive feedback and consider it, consider changing my design, whatever the next action is. So yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, drill down to actions. Action.
Love it. Now, I know you're probably tired of AI conversations as much as everyone is, right? But the world is changing, and it's changing very quickly. And as you noticed, there's probably a lot more AI content being generated. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but what do you think is going to separate great learning experiences from the average ones?
It's so funny because I was just having lunch with my son today, and we were talking about this very thing and how very tired we are, how wonderful it would be if there was a browser that filtered out all the AI content in all of your searches. Because now, like the first page of all the searches, they're like AI written articles. You open it up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's totally an AI article. You can tell right away, you know? If an organization, and you used the term AI slop a couple of times in this interview today, so I think you're right, you know? If organizations are using AI to generate content, then it seems that they may be aiming for mediocre, you know, like, especially if it's content for training, the content isn't really providing practice with new skills. It's just information dump, right? So they're relying on, this organization might be relying on knowledge dumps and hoping that people will make the leap from knowledge to skills on their own, rather than actually training them how to do those skills. I think what does separate great learning experiences from average ones, with or without AI, are ones that give people practice with feedback, doing the skills that you're training them to do. I don't think that AI is to blame for knowledge dumps. We were doing that way before, and AI has just kind of exacerbated the problem.
Yeah, I love the emphasis on practice. The good news is there's a lot of opportunity for legitimate practice beyond the scope of storyline activities now, right? I know the conversation for the past year and a half was focused on LLMs producing scripted content, but now there's just a ton of potential to really create opportunities for practice. So I'm a big critic of AI slop, but at the same time, I mean, we're trying to adapt. And I am curious, how old is your son? Because I've noticed Gen Z, they're very resistant to using this type of tech. So
my son is 21. He's 21.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It is, because millennials leaning into it, because I think, at least for myself, it feels like we were raised to have to adapt with technology and use it and immediately accept that it's going to be a huge aspect of our lives. And but it's just funny because every Gen Z person I've spoken to, that was about 6 weeks ago, I spoke at a community college here about the opportunity for game designers in the instructional design space. And there's just a gold mine of talent out there, because these guys have the creative mind for actual practice and gamifying learning experiences more than just a drag and drop activity, right? We did really cool activities, by the way. I supported them with a capstone project, and there was just some really cool stuff. We'll produce a video on it. But I was shocked because unfortunately I was telling everyone, like, hey, look, you guys have to lean into this tech, right? Like, it's just not to produce things faster, but to produce things better. And there's going to be an expectation when people are hiring. I know from our side, when we're hiring people, we want to, one, see that the professional, they're capable and competent and they're able to do what we need them to. But now we do expect that efficiency, right? We do want things faster and better. That's when you notice you lose the room. You know what I mean? Like, everyone was excited and they were like, nope, we are going to do it our way, which was, honestly, I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah, good point. The technology, I think that you're using technology in a wonderful way as you're writing your book, in that you're getting outside input on your writing, you know? So you're using the technology as a non-human collaborator, you know, so that you can think about things that you haven't thought of yourself. That's a wonderful way of using technology. Another way to use technology effectively, and I was just having a nice conversation with somebody this morning about this. They have the capability in their platform to be able to put inputs and parameters in an AI type of environment where you're asked a question, the learner completes the question on their own. They just type it in on their own, or they speak it, and then they get feedback based on the parameters that were given, that were programmed into the platform. So I think you're right in that it really does open us up to more more practice, exactly. Activities that give us practice.
I love the comment you made about leaning into the average, or how it's going to allow organizations to produce average content. And the reason why I think there's truth to that too is a lot of the models that everyone's using, like if you're just using ChatGPT to produce content, it was built on a pre-AI world, right? So its job is to take a bunch of collected content, average it out, and produce a response that should be good enough for you to use with whatever you want. Like that naturally averages it out, right? And so when people are just regurgitating content that was designed for a pre-AI world without any creative input of their own, you're going to get that type of average-based content.
Right. Average-based content, which produces average-based training, which produces average performance, to be honest, and at the School of Story Design, I'm really not interested in equipping my students to be average instructional designers. I want them to rock and roll. I want them to be amazing consultants and designers. And, AI generated content from a prompt is not going to equip them to do that. I think you're right. When you look very closely at what has been, generated from an AI prompt, it sounds so good. And then you start reading it and you're like, wait. This doesn't sound so good.
Or it's not true. I was just thinking of an idea, and I'll pitch this to you later, but I know with your courses, and we'll talk about where to find them, it would be fairly straightforward to build a tool, a couple of hours, that allows your users to input a story and to get structured feedback. Because that's kind of what I'm using AI for with my sci-fi book, right? And honestly, it started off because my wife just didn't want to hear my ideas. I was out, and I use the voice function, so I'd be outside just kind of hearing the back and forth. And so maybe it was less of a writing tool than just a friend willing to listen to my book pitch. But so I'll bring that up later as to what that looked like, because we do monthly experiments, and because we have to be ahead of this tech, right? We're an agency and we're leaning into this. But one of the experiments was like a chatbot for customer service. So you actually talk to a person, it gets frustrated. They're mad because they missed their flight, and it's kind of intimidating, right, to get yelled at by this AI bot, and it sounds human, right? And even and we built that 3 months ago, and there's still improvements that can be made on it. So I'll circle back on that pitch, but I know we're almost wrapping up with time. The last question I wanted to ask was about trends. I know going beyond AI, what are trends in this space that you're most optimistic about?
Well, since we're talking about AI, I look at my friends in the industry who are tackling the benefits and the pitfalls of using AI and automation in their work. They're smart, they're tech savvy, and more importantly, they haven't lost sight of the purpose of training, that we must be human-centric and that the results must be performance-based. So some of the people that I really admire who are, I think they would call themselves tech enthusiasts, always up on the latest. One of them is Garima Gupta. Garima has an agency called Artha Learning, and she's speaking everywhere all the time, and she has really great things to say on LinkedIn, and she's a good friend. But I admire how she approaches the use of technology in a way that does exactly what you're saying, gives people practice doing things. So I really admire her. And then also Megan Torrance at Torrance Learning. She was doing, X API, when it first came out, and she just hung on to that for a really long time, even when it was past its prime. But she showed me some amazing things that she was doing with XAPI. Is that right? XAPI?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, I had her on this call, and she leaned into that 100%. That is, She was doing it before it was cool.
Yes. And she remains doing it. And then just the quality of the work that her team produces as well. It's just, she seems to really get it. They both really get that we're training humans, technology has its place, and I think they have a nice balance. So I'm really optimistic about that. I'm optimistic that there are still people in our field who are pushing forward and helping the rest of us kind of parse out what's helpful and what's not, and also pushing us as an industry to explore on our own. But I really like watching the trailblazers of technology rather than being one, because my thing is storytelling, and my thing is, really making a human connection in our learning. And you can, assist that, I think, with technology, and I have experimented with that, but that's what makes me optimistic about our industry.
Love it. No, and I 100% agree, right? You have a lot of the smartest thought leaders out there are leaning back to the fundamentals, right?
Yes.
Like driving behavior change, creating situations where they can practice, and then also humanizing content, right? And it's funny, even the tech-oriented ones. So
yeah.
I love the approach. And one of the cool things, Rance, is I know you offered a discount code, and we're going to include that in the description. But just as we wrap this up, where are some good places to get a hold of you? Where can we learn more?
Sure. Schoolofstorydesign.com is where you can find me and my crew. Our students are in one of 2 certification tracks or both. So if you want to learn how to write and train with a story, take the Instructional Story Design track. If you want to learn how to produce a story with Vyond's animation tool, take the Vyond Story Production track. Start with level 1, and for Ninjatropic listeners, we have an exclusive coupon for 10% off any courses or bundles. Ninja Story 10, that is your coupon code. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm always talking about storytelling for instruction, but also storytelling for just business storytelling, for sales, for marketing, for presenting. I'd welcome, an invite from you on LinkedIn. You can also find me there.
Wonderful. Rance, thank you so much for the time, and I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you, Eric.
Want to learn more about microlearning best practices? We've got you covered. Check out the video cards for more related content. Don't forget to subscribe for weekly tips and explore the description for a curated list of resources to continue your e-learning journey.